At 7:02 p.m., a deputy clipped the HOA's padlock off my gate, while the president shouted that community rules outranked my deed. I held up a county plat in one hand and a power report in the other. Proof their camera pole was planted on my side and quietly stealing electricity from my meter. And when the room saw it all blown up on the projector, the gavel in her hand suddenly looked smaller than a toy, and you could feel the vote turn in the air like a weather front. My name's Noah Briggs. I'm a civil draftsman who used to help a floodplain team figure out where water should go when storms don't read the forecast after my wife died. I moved with my daughter Elle into her grandparents' old cedar-sided place in Summit Oaks Reserve outside Douglas County. We were the new folks trying to do things by the book, cut the grass, fix the fence, keep our heads down, because grief is loud enough without neighborhood drama. You know what I mean. Then one Monday at 6 or 3 a.m., someone pounded the door like a landlord in a movie, and there stood Cheryl Davenport in a navy blazer smile that hit everything but the eyes clipboard tucked to her ribs like a badge. "Good morning, Mr. Briggs. Quick housekeeping," she said, handing me a pink slip with 500 printed, like a headline, and $250 per day. Under it, for a non-approved stain color, another paper said, "Approved mechanical apparatus in 72 hours. She meant the old pump house and the culvert gate behind my fence, both older than half the houses on our block. I told her the counties cut that drainage swale in '89, and she gave me this patient tilt like I was cute. Community standards evolve, she said. Snapped a photo over my shoulder without asking, and walked off like she'd already won. That week became a parade of paper cuts, a citation at 2:11 p.m. because a green hose was visible from the street. A golf cart with security stenciled on the side, telling the UPS driver to wait at the clubhouse until clearance is given, and then cherry on top. An orange boot on my truck in my own driveway, with a cheerful notice that said, "Call to resolve." I called some guy. Said, "Pay the compliance bond." The boot comes off like I'd missed the fine print that our HOA now charged a $12,500 hostage fee for good faith. I tried to be reasonable, filed an architectural request for the stain attached. The old builder brochure, paid the $100, printed the meets and bounds survey from closing, and took it to office hours. Cheryl glanced at it and said, "Maps can be charming, Mr. Briggs. But this is about fairness." I laughed once, the small kind you hear when someone pokes your pride in public, and something in me started to go cold. The day I broke was smaller than you'd expect. Elle's inhaler refill got bounced because the guard at our gate told the driver I wasn't in compliance, and my neighbor across the street, Ruth Mallory, 78, with lungs like paper, called to ask if I could help, because her oxygen delivery had been told to unload at the pool lot and walk it down the hill. I stood in my driveway staring at that boot in the morning sun and decided I was done being the polite guy who hopes bullies get bored next morning. I found a shiny new padlock looped through a steel U somebody had screwed into my fence post, 3 paces inside my line, plus a gray conduit feeding from the HOA's new camera pole through the boards into my sub-panel. My breaker had been flipped off. I flipped it back on and heard the camera whir like it had an opinion. At 7:12 a.m., Cheryl rolled up with a polo shirt guy, wearing a badge that read Neighborhood Safety Specialist. She took a picture of me taking a picture and called it a security measure. The polo guy pointed at the boot and asked if the bond was paid. And that's when the floodplain part of my brain stood up and cleared its throat, because lines don't lie and numbers don't care who holds the gavel. I made 3 calls first to a surveyor I trust. Ava Kim, Colorado. PLS, she set a tripod. In the late light, took shots with the kind of patience that makes truth feel heavy and square. Then tapped her tablet and said, 1.9 feet their camera footing, and that lock are on your parcel. She printed a sealed drawing with a red deed line hugging my boundary, and I could breathe again. Second call to Front Range Electric. A tech named Preston popped the meter. Fed a paper strip through a printer that looked like it time-traveled. You've got a phantom load, midnight to 4 a.m., around 0.9 kilowatt a day. For 16 days, he said. That's a camera and a heater on a timer. And yes, it's on your leg. He signed the report and told me to make 2 copies. Third call to the state licensing office for private security. The woman on the phone typed, paused, and sent me a letter that said, the outfit booting cars on our street had an expired license. Yeah, that happened. While the coffee cooled on my counter, I started a folder. Ava's sealed survey went in a clear sleeve with a blue circle on the 9-foot note. Preston's KBBH report stapled to a photo of the conduit, with the dates written by hand. The licensing letter highlighted where it said, expired. Then a board member I barely knew, Dylan Price, sidled up on my walk and handed me a folded printout. You didn't get this from me, he said. I'm resigning after this. It was an email from Cheryl to the board. If we hold firm on the bond and keep deliveries tight, he'll list by June. We can reset the street optics. I read it twice, once with my eyes, and once with whatever runs your blood. When someone smiles, while they take your air that night. I built 6 exhibits, A through F, like you do when you need a story that survives quotes and eye rolls. A was the sealed survey. Red line versus blue. Claim B, the meter graph, with the midnight spike. The state letter on unlicensed security. D, an email from the county floodplain manager saying the culvert gate sits in a municipal stormwater facility, and the HOA has no authority to order modifications. Cheryl starve him into selling email with the headers, visible. F, a dashcam clip. Dylan texted of a cart telling FedEx, no packages for Briggs. Until he gets right. I filed theft of service and tampering complaints with the sheriff posted. The licensing complaint walked door to door for signatures to call a special member meeting. Our bylaws say 10% can do that. And I got 17 in one afternoon because it turns out people who got fined for porch chairs have good pen pressure. Monday night. The clubhouse smelled like coffee and copy paper. 90 people crowded a room built for 60. The mic popped. The projector hummed. Cheryl wore the gavel like jewelry. The treasurer sweated through his collar. The secretary tapped her pen until the rhythm annoyed even herself. A deputy leaned on the back wall, reading the room without moving. A state investigator in a gray blazer waited like someone who doesn't need to raise her voice, and a local reporter. Tanya Ruiz aimed a red light that makes folks behave differently. Cheryl did her harmony speech about optics and cohesion and the dangers of rogue homeowners. Then I walked to the mic with my folder and said thank you, and laid Exhibit A on the overhead, the wall filled with Ava's drawing. Red deed line, blue HOA presumption, a little square labeled camera footing, and a dot on my fence post where the padlock sat, both inside the red scaled, signed, sealed. I said, sliding the embossed copy to the deputy. Cheryl tried maps can be manipulated, and the crowd did that. Low ripple people do when they smell nonsense. Exhibit B circled the midnight load, and Preston raised his hand from the back. "That's his leg, we verified in the field," he said. Exhibit C, and the state investigator stepped to the second mic. Neighborhood safety. Specialist has no current license. A cease and desist was served at 6:41 p.m. She said Exhibit D read itself. The county owns the culvert authority, not the HOA. And Exhibit E, the email about starving me into listing, fell like a wrench on concrete. Ruth lifted her oxygen cannula and said, "I went 2 days without a refill because of you." Cheryl tried to gavel me into silence and asked the deputy to remove me. The deputy didn't move. "He's within his member rights, ma'am," she said. Cheryl pivoted to legal tone. "The lien stands. He endangered the lake with unapproved machinery." I held up the floodplain email and said, "The machinery is what keeps your living room dry. Your authority ends at the blue line, and that's when gravity took over." The deputy stepped to the dais and said, "Davenport, on probable cause for theft of service and tampering. I need to separate you while we take statements." The state investigator added, "Civil penalties for unlicensed security." Dylan rose like his legs finally remembered how to be useful and moved to remove the president for cause. Under Section 2.7, hands went up. The secretary counted twice and said 54 to 20. Someone slid the gavel to the middle of the table, and Cheryl stared at it, then set a key ring on the wood like a small surrender outside. In the blue hour, we walked to my fence. The padlock hung bright on my post. The deputy lifted bolt cutters and asked if there was any reason not to clip. "Only if optics outrank deeds," I said. She cut once the lock fell into her palm, with a soft tick that sounded like a room exhaling. She bagged it, wrote 7:02 p.m., and a case number, took a photo of the conduit with Ava's red line held against the post, so the map and the world sat in the same frame. That's the exact moment my chest let go. By noon the next day, the wire on my side was coiled and sealed. The boot was gone. UPS left Elle's inhaler with a polite knock. Ruth waved from her porch with a plastic cup of ginger ale. Cheryl's name vanished from the website, and people started whispering about lawyers and insurance and how expensive fairness gets after you break it. Some neighbors told me I'd embarrass the community by going on camera. Others said I should sue everybody in a blazer until the apology letters hit every mailbox. And somewhere in the middle is what I keep turning over, whether I poured gasoline on a fire or finally took a match away. You know what I mean. I didn't set out to teach a lesson. I wanted to fix a fence, keep a promise, go to work, come home. Not ask permission to open my own gate, but lines matter most when somebody decides they don't. And sometimes the only thing that cuts clean is proof. A red line on a survey, a midnight spike on a meter, a note from the county saying who actually owns the water when it gets mean. That's my story, ending exactly where the consequence landed. A gavel, leaving one hand a lock popping into a bag, a line put back where it belongs. So now I want yours. Was I right to force a public vote, or should I have kept it quiet and lawyered up first? When do standards turn into control? Where do neighbors stop being neighbors and start playing? Enforcers, drop your take in the comments. Tell me what HOAs get right and what you've seen them wreck. And if you've ever had to draw a line on a map to remind someone where they stop, and you start share how you did it. Like the video. If this hit home, send it to the neighbor who needs a backbone. Subscribe for the next one. Because lines don't defend themselves. People do.